For anyone wondering, yes, I still have plans for my Eren Yeager and Light Yagami video essay and a lot of other videos I'm working on, but right now this English project came up and I gotta work on this. It's really important to me. That being said, there is a preview on my Patreon if you want to support me and if you want to see the video. There's a free trial and you can always change your mind. A hero is a reflection of our culture or what values we have in our time. Often a hero demonstrates the embodiment of the ideals of the creating culture. As people have evolved, our idea of a hero has changed over time. Mythological heroes such as Beowulf or Odysseus have striking differences compared to Batman and Superman. Let's look at how our perspective of a hero has changed over time. Back in ancient times, the Iliad was a popular epic featuring the long tale of a soldier who fought in the Trojan War and his journey home. But this story isn't your typical Captain America. Odysseus wasn't Sean Bean getting himself killed like you'd think. There is a story in the Iliad where a Greek soldier stands up to Agamemnon and his warmongering ways. But Odysseus takes a staff and beats the soldier until he cries. The strange thing is that Odysseus is considered in the right on this scene, and the soldier is considered the bad guy. It is important to know that people's ideas of morals have changed as we evolved. Back then, people had more trust in kings and royalty and found strong, brutal soldiers to be heroes regardless of what they did. Now, there are many modern interpretations of the Iliad that either portray Odysseus as a hero by our standards, or maybe make him a villain protagonist. But that doesn't change the fact that in his day and age, he was a hero. And now there's Beowulf, a testosterone-filled story featuring the monster slayer himself, Beowulf. Beowulf is slightly different from Odysseus, as he's not really villainous by our standards, but he fits the criteria of how people viewed heroes and Vikings viewed Nordic warriors. Beowulf hails from the Geatish tribe, who came to Denmark to help the Danes fight the monster Grendel. Beowulf feels he owed Hrothgar, the king of the Danes, a favor after Hrothgar saved his father's life, which drives Beowulf to help fight Grendel. But not only that, he did it for glory. Beowulf knew that by slaying Grendel, he'd become a hero and receive fame, gold, and kingship from it. Beowulf is similar to most ideas of a hero, but he represents the virtues of a Nordic warrior at the time. Nords believed in strength, honor, and power. They believed in fighting for glory and to prove they were legends. Which is why Beowulf was so popular even during the Christianization of Europe. One thing Beowulf and Odysseus have in common is that they represent their era's ideals of heroes. A big, strong man who fights for glory and honor and is loyal to their king. These are a representation of the surrounding culture they were built up of. But neither of them is like our generation's idea of what a hero means. And two characters couldn't prove that any more than Bilbo Baggins and Askeladd.
Stop, I'm already late! Late for what? I'm going on an adventure!
If I was going to bring up Beowulf, it would be treason to not bring up J.R.R. Tolkien's works. Tolkien loved classical literature like Beowulf and even made the first English translation of the poem. The story of The Hobbit is very similar to the climax of Beowulf. 12 warriors and a thief go to fight a dragon. Only in The Hobbit, the story is told from the thief's perspective, Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo is very different from Beowulf or Odysseus. He's not some superhuman who's willing to take on gods for glory. Instead, he's a small, fat farmer who wants nothing more than the life he lives now. This is because, as time went on, morals became more important than physical traits. This means that a hero didn't have to be super buff or all-powerful. Instead, they just need to be a good person. This goes even deeper when you realize Bilbo rarely fights in the book. When he has to fight giant monsters, most of the time he's going to rely on his wits rather than his sword or his bare hands. And sometimes he's going to rely on the dwarves to help fight for him. A far cry from the masculine monster hunter that is Beowulf. Another thing that sets Bilbo apart is that he's not looking for glory. Instead, he seeks adventure. Eventually, Bilbo realized that not wanting anything more than what you already have is kinda lame. Bilbo's story sparked a new breed of story arcs called the hero's journey, which involve a hero leaving their home into a fantastical world, and when they return, they have a different view of the world around them. As time went on, people then end up becoming more fascinated with not just physically flawed heroes, but morally flawed heroes, such as Red Hood, Deadpool, and even Askeladd.
I am Lucius Artorius Castus, which means, as the heir of Artorius, I'm the rightful king and ruler of all of Britannia.
Now, you might be wondering why I'm using this show's antagonist instead of looking at Thorfinn, the literal star of the show, and that's because Askeladd is probably one of the most interesting characters in Vinland Saga. Not just because of his personality, but also his worldviews, his backstory, everything. Askeladd is different from the previous 3 characters that we've explored, because he's not really a hero, not by our standards and not by the show's standards. Instead, he's the villain. But he does share a lot of qualities with Odysseus and Beowulf that make Askeladd a villain, meanwhile they are heroes. Specifically, Askeladd has some traits similar to Beowulf. They're both seafaring warriors with inhumane strength. But that's really where the similarities end. Because unlike Beowulf, Askeladd is much more brutal, he's much more violent, and he's more flawed morally. We need to understand that Beowulf represents a lot of the positive traits that a Nordic warrior would have. And if Beowulf represents the virtues of a Nordic warrior, then Askeladd represents the flaws of a Nordic warrior. Askeladd often would go out on raids, killing villagers, and often sees it as blowing off steam. It's even implied that he has sold people into slavery countless times. But when you look more into Askeladd's story, you realize he's more complex than most people would think. Askeladd isn't a Nordic warrior, he's a pirate. In order to fully understand why Askeladd is the way he is, we need to fully understand his backstory. Many years ago, a Danish war chief named Olaf took in a Welsh noblewoman as his concubine. The noblewoman then mothered a child, and when she got sick, Olaf threw her to the stables, where the child was sent to work. This child would be called Askeladd by the other slaves, meaning, however, his true name bestowed upon him by his mother was Lucius Castus Artorius, who was a Roman general that united the Celtic tribes and founded the Kingdom of Britannia. At some point, Askeladd got tired of his father's abuse and decided to kill him in his sleep. Then Askeladd took his mother to Wales, where she was rightfully buried, but then he was taken under the wing of a Welsh nobleman. Eventually, Askeladd learned to love Wales and his Roman Celtic heritage, but he hated Danes and he hated Nordic culture. This included his own pirate crew and even Bjorn, a man he considered to be his one true friend. Now, last I checked, being racist isn't technically a quality of a hero, and that's very true. Like I said, Askeladd's a villain, not a hero. However, he does share qualities to much older versions of a hero. So in comparison to Bilbo Baggins, Askeladd would be a villain. However, if you put him next to Odysseus, Askeladd would technically be a hero, because Odysseus was also a hero, and he did pretty similar things. There's also the problem of his backstory. Askeladd's backstory isn't like what most heroes would be. Bilbo Baggins came from a noble family. Beowulf was a famous monster hunter, and Odysseus was already a respected soldier even before the Trojan War. But Askeladd was born into slavery. He would spend his childhood and adult years hoping that some messiah or god would come back and help him, or at least fix the broken world around him. However, nothing changed, and so Askeladd realized that he would have to take matters into his own hands. Most heroes might try to find the most peaceful route or the safest route in order to reach their goals, but Askeladd views everything as a means end. That means he's willing to do whatever it takes to ensure the safety of Wales, the change of the world, and a better place. That includes manipulating the young Prince Canute, killing whoever he deems necessary, including an entire village of starving people, plus the babies. Yeah, when I said this guy was a villain, I was not messing around. What makes him a hero to most people's minds is his final scene. In this scene, he's pushed into a corner. Either he can kill Prince Canute, or Wales becomes enslaved by the Danes. And Askeladd chooses neither. What he does is that he kills King Sweyn, which would postpone the invasion of Wales, and he goes on a massive rampage. This would eventually lead to his death. However, in that final moment, in that last breath, Askeladd saved more people than he has ever killed, slaughtered, or enslaved. And that is why most people see him as a hero. Askeladd was never a perfect human being. Yes, he's very strong and he's very witty. That's enough to classify as a hero, at least during Odysseus' time, or at least during Beowulf's time. However, this isn't the case in modern times or in Bilbo's time. Askeladd was a villain then, but he still manages to have some sense of character and humanity, such as his relationship with Thorfinn. While neither character likes to admit it, it's clearly a father-son bond. A bond that lasts even after Askeladd's death and throughout Thorfinn's depression. Nowadays, it's really hard to understand who should be a hero in this day and age. To many people, Askeladd is a hero, but the show makes it pretty clear that he's still a villain. So it's really hard to understand whether or not we should define someone as a hero or a villain, which is why various cultures and ideas have different definitions of a hero. During Odysseus' time, a hero was just a very strong person that could fight. During Beowulf's time, it was someone who was looking for glory. During Bilbo's time, it was a good person that wasn't physically perfect. And during Askeladd's time, well, let's just say it's a lot more complicated.